Hello and welcome to your Astro-Forecast for July 2023. If you're listening to this on Patreon, this is also your Tarotscopes for July 2023. And if you're not listening to this on Patreon, know that the beginning of this reading starts as a forecast for the sky from my energy reading perspective. And then we go into some cards, both a Total Betty Goddess card for the month of July and a single tarot card from the Modern Witch Tarot for every single sign of the zodiac. So you can listen to your sun, your moon, your rising. If you choose your Venus and your North Node or any other part of your chart, you can get a full picture from the tarot cards as to the energy that lies ahead. So if you're interested in that, michelleshewalker.com, no. You can go to michelleshewalker.com and find it. But if you're interested specifically in the Patreon, patreon.com/Michelle Shea is where you will find that at the monthly mystic level. So without further ado, we are going to dive in. So how this works is I am not an astrologer, at least not by trade or training. I am an energy reader, and I know a little bit about astrology. So I have recently started combining those two skills into sort of my version of an astro forecast. So yes, some of my predictions or forecasts are going to come from a place of knowing what kind of energy is held in a certain sign or a certain planet. But a lot of it is me just intuitively feeling into the energy of whatever the transit is in the moment of this reading, of this recording. So it might be exactly the same as what you hear elsewhere from a trained astrologer, or it might be a little bit different. But I trust that if you have found this recording, it is because you resonate with this energy. So without further ado, we're going to dive into the major transitions. We're not going to go every single transition that's happening this month, but the major transitions. And I'm getting these from my Magic of I planner, which is a very great planner if you are into the transits of the moon and astrology and just about anything. The version I have also has information about mushrooms. So I'm not being sponsored by them, but I do highly recommend this planner if you're into all of that. And they have at the beginning of every month all of the transits, and then they bold out the important ones. So I will be reading off the ones in bold and then diving into my intuitive energy reader interpretation of what that might feel like for us. So first of all, happy Cancer season to my fellow Cancers. We have already moved from the sun in Cancer last month, so you might be feeling a little more emotional. If you are already a heavy water sign in your natal chart, you might be feeling just like you normally do. I myself have a lot of water and I don't really notice any higher levels of emotions whenever Cancer season hits. But if you have a lot of earth in your chart, or if you tend to keep yourself a little more buttoned up in the emotional sector of things, it might be a little uncomfortable because Cancer season encourages you to express your emotions. And the best message that I have for you as a Cancer, for those that feel uncomfortable during emotions in Cancer season, is that you do not have any wrong emotions. There are no wrong or bad emotions, despite what our upbringing might have told us. And honestly, the best advice that I like to give people is the advice that I actually have heard in parenting tips in when a toddler has a tantrum, in that it's going to last much longer than you actually feel like it does. And most tantrums from a toddler last only 1 to 2 minutes. And if you can just sit with it and breathe into it and let the storm pass, then you actually end up with a much more balanced toddler and you can move on. And that is basically Cancer season. If you have your emotions acting like little tantrum toddlers, it is best to just sit with it, breathe into it, lean into the emotions, and know that even though the fear around leaning into it is that it's going to last forever, it usually lasts for a much shorter duration than you expect it to, even if it feels like it's longer. So journaling's great, crying it out's great, putting on a sad song and feeling your feels are all things that I recommend as a water heavy placement. And we're going to dive into the other transitions happening during this month. So first up, my first bold entry is on July 10th, Mars enters into Virgo. So Mars, the planet of sex, action, passion, kind of our fighting style, entering into Virgo is a little more organized. So the best energy read I have on this is to come to your debates, to your arguments with notes, with talking points. This feels very much a calling out to go into conflict with your thoughts in order, because it is definitely going to be a period of time that's it's just going to be rewarded for that. Like Virgo really rewards those that are sticking to their routines and are staying organized. And I feel that Mars in Virgo is going to reward us for being organized with our arguments. And even when we go to the other side of Mars energy into our sexual situations, being organized with that, like not letting people flake out on you or be sort of wishy-washy with your romantic dates or your sexual dates. It doesn't necessarily have to be romantic. Whatever your arrangement is in the bedroom, letting it be a priority, and also letting sex and even arguing be a part of your routine, something that you honor as an aspect of your wellness. And this goes really well with the idea of Cancer seeing being about letting the emotions flow. This could even be as simple as scheduling an appointment with a therapist to be able to vent your anger and your emotions. It could also be scheduling on your calendar weekly or daily times for self love to take care of your sexual health and embrace that side of yourself. But the overall energy is the organization and being really concise and precise and ritualistic is kind of what I'm getting. So to make it a little more magical and a little less mundane, it is about the ritual, like getting things on the schedule and committing to something on a daily basis or a weekly basis or a monthly basis is a ritual. It's committing to yourself to do this practice. And if just writing things on a calendar and like trudging along on your day-to-day life as like a scheduled grind feels really heavy to you, as it does to me as a water and air placement, then call it a ritual, call it a magical practice. So if you can find a way to commit to your magical practices in the realms of sharing your emotions, your anger, venting, and also embracing your sexual side, you will be rewarded after Mars enters Virgo on July 10th. So the next transit we have is also on the 10th, and this is Mercury entering Leo. I should also take a moment to point out that this particular planner is in United States Pacific time, and I myself am on Central time. So if I look really close at the numbers next to this date, I believe that we will be in July 11th for Pacific, no, yes, for Eastern time. So this is one of these that bridges the gap. If you're in the United States and you're listening to this, depending on what side of the country you're on, it's going to be different dates. And then, as goes without saying, if you're in a different part of the world, adjust the times accordingly. But know that the dates that I'm giving you right offhand without looking really closely at the fine print are going to be in Pacific time. So there could be a slight variation as to which date it is, depending on how early or late in the day this particular transit falls. But the point being is that on July 10th/11th, Mercury enters into Leo. Now, I myself am a Leo Mercury in my natal chart, my natal placement, and I love this placement in my chart. We all have our things in our chart that we're a little more sweep it under the rug and the things that we like to kind of bring to the forefront. And I love my Leo placements. I'm a Mercury and Venus Leo, and the Mercury Leo is, I think, where I, as an introvert, can kind of present myself as that extroverted introvert. Because as long as I feel like I'm on a stage and performing, I can definitely have great communication skills. And I think that that is something to embrace during Mercury and Leo, whether you're introverted or not, whichever end of the spectrum you consider yourself as far as social engagements are. Know that your communication can have a little bit of theatrics to it. And that could be just as simple as motivating yourself to communicate well by imagining that you're putting on a show, or it could be that you are really upping your game in the way that you present yourself to the world and the way you present your communications to the world. So again, communications can be interpersonal between two individuals, could be between a group and an individual, or it could be the way that we communicate online. So we could be talking about our social media presence as well. So depending on how this plays out, up the game, up the theatrics, give it a little more razzle dazzle is what this is saying. And that means different things for different people because it depends on where your baseline is. Like if you are already a pretty flamboyant communicator, this could be, you know, adding more visual aids to your communications. It could be if you are doing social media stuff, maybe you are adding more videos as opposed to images, or you're adding music to the things that you're presenting. It's just upping the theatrics in whatever way works best for where your baseline is for you. So think of the way that you present information to the world, your communication, as a show. And you want it to be entertaining because that is how we keep people's attention and feel important to others and feel valued and feel heard. And it is also a great way to find your audience because if you are upping the theatrics in a way that feels authentic to you, I'm not going to lie, are probably going to alienate some people in your audience because it's just not going to be their cup of tea. But you're going to find the people that really resonate with your specific brand of communication. So don't play it safe. When Mercury enters Leo, it is not about playing it safe with your communications. It is about showing up center stage as your full, flamboyant, authentic self. And that doesn't have to mean in a feather boa and a sequins dress, metaphorically. It's whatever your authentic self is. So if you are more of a tweed jacket and buttoned up in a little, chair, sort of masterpiece theater type style communicator, then that's how you show up. But be your most authentic self and don't be afraid of the fact that that is going to alienate some people, regardless of what end of the spectrum you're on, because in the long run, it's going to be so much more fun to communicate with your audience, again, be it on social media or be it in person, when you are being your most authentic self. So embrace that and heighten it to a level that feels theatrical. I feel like this feels like it's a period of going past the mark so that we can bring it back down. So be a little caricatured in the way that you take this week or this on this transit period time, and then you can kind of adjust it and bring it back down as we move into a different sign, as we move from Mercury in Leo into Mercury in Virgo eventually. But for right now, take it to the height and then adjust accordingly as the month unfolds. Next up, we have all the way to the 22nd of July, but it's a big one because Venus is stationing retrograde. Mercury may get all the glory, but Venus in retrograde is always something that sets off both a sense of humor and alarm bells whenever I see a transit happening. So Venus stationing retrograde, Venus retrograde is taking the energy of Venus, love, romance, beauty, aesthetics, and flipping it in a way that feels a little mutated. Just like whenever Mercury goes retrograde, our communication, our transportation, and our technology goes a little haywire. When Venus stations retrograde, the way that we perceive love and romance and beauty and relationships is a little skewed. So I'm not gonna lie, it's not an unheard of time period for a lot of breakups. I personally have had the two biggest breakups of my life happen during Venus retrogrades. And I believe Venus only goes retrograde every 2 to 3 years. So it's not an every other month or every 3 months occurrence like Mercury retrograde. It happens a little less frequently. So that also means that it feels a little bigger though. I feel like the impact feels bigger because we are sort of cleaning out the closets, but the back of the closet that we haven't been to for a while. Whereas Mercury retrograde happening so often, it's like clearing off your desk. That you're at that maybe more often, you see what's on there, you kind of move things around and shift things around already. Whereas when we have a planet that doesn't go retrograde quite as frequently, there's a little more stuff that we forgot was there that we're now doing a little KonMari method and deciding whether it stays or whether it goes. And so that's what this is doing to your love life and your aesthetic. So this can be a really fun period to experiment with a different aesthetic in your fashion or your hair or the way that you present yourself to the world. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom and oh my God, everyone's going to break up and we're all going to be so sad. It can be a really playful time as long as you don't make any really, really solid commitments. So both in love and in your aesthetic choices, don't do anything that you can't reverse easily when Venus goes direct. That is the biggest rule of a Venus retrograde, is don't commit to any permanent aesthetic changes. So plastic surgery would be a good example there. Like if you're doing plastic surgery, especially if you get the idea for it during Venus retrograde, it's best to wait to have the actual surgery after Venus has gone direct, just to make sure that that wild hair that you got in your mind is going to follow through into this new, more stable energy. And, then like don't get a huge haircut if you just got the idea after Venus went retrograde. I'm a huge fan of short hair. I'm a huge fan of bangs. I don't think that either one of them is necessarily ever a mistake. But if you've always been a long hair, no bangs person, you've never considered cutting it off or having bangs or having a pixie or something like that in your life, and Venus goes retrograde on the 22nd and you suddenly want to have like a 1920s flapper bob, maybe hold off on a little bit. Gather your inspiration for it now. Do a little Pinterest board that you can bring to your hairdresser, but don't actually schedule and go to the appointment until after Venus has gone direct. And then finally, of course, that also goes for your relationships. I know I just said that my breakups have happened during Venus retrograde, and that is kind of a more permanent change. But neither of them actually were ones that I completely burned a bridge during the breakup period. So anything that's gonna like majorly alter your relationships, they always say that it's not a great idea to get married during a Venus retrograde, particularly if it is like a last minute decision, like an elopement or something like that. And it's also not necessarily going to be permanent if you do break up during a Venus retrograde. But from my own experience, it was. So I'm going to give you that little asterisk. It's just, basically the message there is if you are going to break up, if you get the impulse to break up during Venus retrograde, I don't regret either of my decisions to do so. So I don't think that it was definitely in alignment. There wasn't anything skewed about my decision to leave these relationships, but they definitely are, it definitely would be a situation that you wouldn't want to just get really angry one evening and decide that that's the end and completely write that person off and never want to talk to them again, or say something that you really regret or do something that you really regret that's going to forever hinder your ability to reconnect to that connection. That being said, also don't exit a relationship thinking that it's going to be some sort of manipulation that gets you to reconnect to this relationship. So trust and value whatever unfolds from that decision, from that impulse to break up. And again, I honestly kind of have a soft spot in my heart for Venus retrograde breakups because every time one of them has happened for me, it has transformed my life in the best possible way. And as someone who's a former codependent and a former love addict, that was a lot of it. Getting out of those two relationships were both prior to me doing the work on those things. And each one of them clarified another part of that journey and made me more aware of my own places that I needed to heal and made me a more complete person in the long run, because I didn't realize how much I was relying on these people to be the completion of my soul. Which, P.S., that's never the case. I don't even care if it's like your twin flame and you think it's like the best person ever. You are complete in and of yourself, and everything else is icing on the cake. But I digress. So moving on from that Venus stationing retrograde, which happens for a little bit. I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say 3 months. I could be completely wrong on that. tune in for next month's next month's forecast, and we'll see if I was wrong, and I'll tell you when it ends. Then on the 22nd, also we have the Sun entering into Leo. So again, we have that Leo energy. Go bigger, go bolder, go brighter, heighten the energy. Sun in Leo is not a bad time to make new connections, to be seen, to put yourself out there in the world. So this is really feeling like a sun shining on you, like a spotlight. So if you have something that you've been wanting to draw attention to, particularly if it comes to your business or your career, I think the Sun and Leo time period is a really great time for that. It's a good time to try to get press exposure or to launch something that's going to put you in the limelight, a podcast, a web series, whatever it might be, a website if you don't have one yet. A YouTube page would also be a good one as well. It's a good time to be seen in a way that almost feels performative, but also to use that spotlight of the sun to your advantage. And if you are a Leo sun, happy birthday season, baby, because I love me some Leos in my life. It's something about that Mercury Leo match that I resonate with you. I appreciate your presence, and go be your beautiful, bold selves. Moving forward on July 23rd, Chiron stations retrograde. So Chiron is known as the wounded healer, which I've heard that so many times it almost feels cliche at this time. So I'm going to go a little more into the energy here. And Chiron station retrograde is a good time. Therapy is coming up big. So this is the second time that talking to a therapist has come up, because we did have that with Mars entering into Virgo. So if you've been thinking about therapy, if it's been calling out to you, definitely consider that. Go deep, go into it. And this is definitely the energy around Chiron retrograde. It feels both heavy and light at the same time. This feels like going back and checking our work on the healing that we've done. So it doesn't necessarily feel like it's going to be a breeze, because we're revisiting some stuff that we thought we were over. We're dredging up some, particularly when it comes to like family issues or self-esteem issues, or the things that you go to therapy to have someone help guide you through, those core wounds that you've been carrying around. I feel like if you're listening to this recording, you have done a lot of work around your core wounds, and you really feel like you've come past a lot of your old triggers and old patterns and old behaviors, and you've healed a lot, and I want to honor you for that. Know that this Chiron retrograde feels like it might feel like a backslide, but it's just a checking your work. This really feels, the metaphor I'm getting as I look into this is you've written the manuscript of your healing journey, and Chiron retrograde is you going back through with your red pen to edit it, not to correct what happened or to correct how you healed, but to refine the story a little bit and to take out anything that's unnecessary and to reword things a little bit. And that's the image that I'm getting here, really, is just like you going back through your healing journey, autobiography, metaphorically, and editing it and getting it ready for publication and presentation to the world. So this also could be coming up because there are some old stories that you're still telling yourself that just need to be reworked. They don't necessarily need to be healed because you've done the healing. You just need to reword them in a way that feels much more in alignment with where you're headed and who you want to be. And sometimes this is as simple as changing a negative statement to an affirmative statement. So if you think that you are never, I don't even want to think of an example because I don't want to make this too individualized, but if you say that you never have something happen for you, change it to you are constantly open to different opportunities for things to happen. And that was a vague example, but I'm really getting a hint that I'm not supposed to go into really deep specifics so that you can fill in the blanks on your own. But you get the point. Changing a negative statement in your head to an affirmative statement can always, always, always be done. You can say the exact same thing negatively as you do positively. It doesn't mean that you have to lie about what you're saying. You're just tweaking the words. So it's a vocabulary exercise. And that is really what I'm getting from this Chiron retrograde, is just slightly editing your story. It's not a deep edit. You've already done a really good job of writing the story already, but you're just making some tweaks, and it's going to really make it sing. It's going to make it a bestseller as opposed to something that just like sits at Amazon and no one ever orders, if we're going to continue with that book metaphor. Our final transition in bold is on the 28th, and it is Mercury entering into Virgo. So you might have remembered I mentioned this while we were talking about Mercury entering into Leo, because when Mercury enters into Leo, we are going big, bold, we are going heightened, higher than we maybe feel comfortable with. And then by the end of the month, on the 28th, when Mercury enters Virgo, we can button it back up a little bit. We've now kind of gone very flamboyant with the way that we are communicating with the world, and now we can bring it back into a more structured container and have a little more, what I'm getting is a little less show and a little more substance. Oh, that was perfect. That was the exact statement that was supposed to come through. So from Leo into Virgo with Mercury, we're going from lots of show to a little less show, a little more substance. Not that Mercury in Leo wasn't substance, but it was substance that was kind of hidden behind a lot of flash and glamour. Whereas when we're ready to bring it into Virgo, we're taking it down a notch and really making sure that the substance is coming forward. So it's like you've kind of hooked people in with the flashy, shiny sequence. And then it's like the book cover. Yeah, like if the book cover, why are all these book metaphors? If you've been thinking about writing a book, maybe these messages are coming forward to you, which I'm talking to myself on that one as well. But it's like the book cover is like bold and beautiful and flashy and maybe even has some sequence on it or has like bright colors and it's hot pink and like you're like, whoa, what is that? I gotta pick that book up off the shelf. And then when Mercury enters into Virgo, we've taken that dust jacket off and the book's still great, but it's just a little less flashy and we're getting into the actual meat of the chapters. So you hook them in with the flashy book jacket cover, and now you're really letting them see the substance underneath it in your communication. So what does this look like? This looks a little less like the social media hooks or like clickbait or anything like that, and more like long form content. I just recently did a newsletter, which you can sign up for over at michelleshewalker.com, that was talking about how I've been called really hardcore into more long form content in my life. And so now when I get the urge to go to something that's like a little quick burst of dopamine, like scrolling Instagram or scrolling Facebook, I'll try to find the version of that that's slightly longer. Like I subscribe to some very lovely long written newsletters. And so if I'm like scrolling through a bunch of captions on Instagram, I'm like, hold on, wait, where can I find more substance? And then I go to these longer newsletters, or I go to a Substack blog, or I open up an actual book. Who would have thought? And read something with a little more substance and a little more depth, because you can get into that with a longer format. So Mercury entering into Virgo is a little like that. It's coming into a place where you're communicating in a way that people need a longer attention span than just 20 seconds to really get into it. But that's great because you've already hooked in the right audience with your Leo energy, and they want to know more. They want to read your deepest thoughts, or, whatever it is. Read, hear. You might be just doing this in a social circle. So like you've hooked people in with your flamboyant energy as a friend, and now it's time for those intimate late night chats over a cup of tea where you really get into the depths of your soul. And because you weren't afraid to alienate the people that didn't resonate with your flashiness during Mercury and Leo, you can trust that this opening up and this going deeper is going to resonate with the person that's sitting across from you. I love that for us. So, if you are listening to this on the General Collective pages, YouTube, Instagram, hopefully this will get posted there this month. Last month was a little crazy. I went through a move, things were delayed. I never ended up getting the General Collective reading posted, but maybe as I posted this one, I went ahead and did that one as a flashback. So we'll see. It might end up online after all. But if you're listening to this in the General Collective pages, you can dive in deeper with me and the rest of my Patreon collective, and you can do it as a 7-day free trial if you choose, because that is now an option at the monthly mystic level over on my Patreon. So the monthly mystic's normally $11 per month. That's nothing. You get access to these Tarotscopes. You get access to the weekly week ahead spreads with a little goddess riff. You get access to the extended monthly videos on the new and full moon, as well as the post full moon group therapy sessions that we do where I read cards for all your questions. And it's just a good time, man. So the monthly mystic level is really the level where it's at. If you go higher than that, I truly appreciate the support and you do get some swag from me, some products. If you go lower than that, you do get these monthly Tarotscopes. No, correction. You do get the week ahead spreads, as well as the distance Reiki that I send out on Sundays. But the monthly mystic level is just like the sweet spot where you get kind of almost everything, and it's only $11. But again, you also get to try it out for a 7-day free trial. And I always recommend doing it at the beginning of the week or the beginning of the month, because you do get the month ahead spread that I'm talking about here, and then you also get to try out the weekly, like week ahead spreads that happen on every Monday. You get to see the distant Sunday recap and its full extent rather than just the little blurb that I share on my Instagram. It's a fun time, is what I'm saying. So I would love to have you over there, even if it's for the free trial. And if you are listening to this on the Patreon, the rest of that glorious reading starts right now.